I was part of a discussion the other day in the office, and the discussion was about cars and what is the cheapest way to own or have a car. And one of my colleagues has argued that the cheapest way to have a car is to lease a new electric vehicle, because quite obviously, their words, that way you don't end up paying for expensive repairs and the interest is quite low, and when you sell it, it's still quite a good value, so it's obviously the cheapest. And it did sound quite convincing, but the only problem is that this statement is just not true. But is there a way we could calculate these kinds of things where we are using something on the long term and want to look at what's the cheapest in the long term? Well, there is. It's called the TCO model, and that's what we quite often use in a business setting, and that's short for total cost of ownership. And that's what I want to teach you how to do in this video. So to calculate total cost of ownership, first we have to look at the cost of acquisition. And by the way, this is useful for everything that can be owned or rented. It's useful for vehicles, for cars, for motorcycles, for boats, for tools, for real estate, anything that you are using in the long term. So the first cost element is the acquisition. First we need to buy the thing for such amount of money, and then let's say 5 years from now we will sell it for another sum of money. The difference between the two is the value that we are losing over time, and that sometimes we call depreciation or amortization. That's the first cost element. The second cost element is the cost of money, and that's a quite interesting concept. If you are taking a loan to buy the thing, it's quite straightforward because you do pay an interest. They tell you how much the interest rate is. Let's say it's 5%. So if you loan X amount of money, each year you have to pay 5% of that just to rent that amount of money. But if you don't rent, or if you don't take a loan, but instead you use your own money, then it becomes a little bit more conceptual. So let's assume that you have money to buy a car. If you instead took that money and put it on the stock market or invested it in some other ways, then you could expect that you would have a return on your investment. And by not doing that, but instead you buy a car, you lock up that amount of money in the asset. And so that amount of money won't be able to turn a profit for you. And that lost profit is known as alternative cost. So that's the second part, that's the cost of money. The third cost element is the fixed cost. So these include every cost that you endure just by having the asset, because you need to store it, you need to pay insurance, you need to pay a garage or hangar fee, or anything else that you have to pay regardless of how much you use it. That's fixed costs. And then the last element is the easiest or most simple, as the variable cost. These are the costs that depend on how much you use the thing. In case of a car, that would contain fuel cost, tires if you use it that much. So these four cost elements together make up the TCO, the total cost of ownership. Now, quite obviously, the more you use the thing, the cheaper it is per hour or per kilometer or whatever, because the fixed annual cost will be divided into more and more pieces if you look at that way. So how do you calculate what is the cheapest on the long run, and why are you interested in the long run and not the short term? The way you make a decision is to come up with scenarios. Let's say one scenario is loaning an electric car. The other one is buying an electric car for cash. There could be another one for driving a used petrol car, driving a used diesel car. You calculate the TCO for all of those, and the one that comes out to be the least amount of money in TCO is the one that you should be choosing. You're not really interested in what happens tomorrow or in the first year. You want to have the most success over the long term. At least that's how businesses do it, and that's how I think is the best way to do it. I hope you found this interesting. I thank you for joining, and I will see you in the next one.